Hello and welcome to another Here's a Storm Quick Tip. Today I wanted to talk about double support and why it's starting to pick up in popularity in coordinated and more high level Storm Lake. Um, so, double support, obviously as the name implies, is usually double healer or a healer plus a support hero, such as like a Zarya or something. But more often than not, in uh, it currently means double healer. So, in this case, Uther Stukov, which our opponents drafted in the scrim, they are the typical 1-2 for this comp, and that's because of the amount of utility and healing they have. And so, what double support comps do well, in particular, is obviously they let you out sustain opponents in fights, but they also make it very hard for the average comp to do what it wants to do in fights effectively. And so that's more important. And so what I mean by that is usually healers are split up to do certain things, which is one is a save and one is a sustain healer. And so what that usually means is, like, for example, in this case, on our side, Anna's a sustain healer. She wants longer fights. She wants them to keep shooting off heal darts every 2 seconds, and she wants to hit multiple people with them. So the longer the fight goes, the more healing output she has. But to save a single person, her heal dart really doesn't do enough healing to make a huge difference. If someone's getting dove and blown up, for example, even with heal grenade, it's a little tough for her to save anyone until active reload. On the other hand, you have a Brightwing. And what does Brightwing do? Well, she's a save healer for the most part. She can give spell shield. And so that's really good because of the spell armor. 30 spell armor is very good if you're being dove or if you're worried about getting hit by like a full range of Ming abilities or something like that. It also grants them movement speed to get out. And then uh, she also has a cleanse built into her kit. And her Z is 25% of their maximum health. And with Hyper Shift, it's even more than that. So, if you know what's coming, then Brightwing is an amazing save healer. If you look at this side, same deal. Stukov, with his trait, can make a very good save heal. Otherwise, he can just sustain with his normal Q. Uther, all his buttons sustain pretty badly, I would say. But the difference is they all give armor, and the Q gives slightly more health than the average single heal. And so what that means is when you combine the health and the armor that's given out, then what happens is the effective heal is essentially a save on the base kit. The other thing Uther has going for him is at 10, you can pick Divine Shield if you want, and that's the ultimate save button. You can use it offensively to let someone get in, such as like a Malthael, or you can use it to get somebody out and just they can usually walk out of whatever the opponent's doing to them. Obviously, normal cleanses are a big part of this, but the whole point of double support is that you have more sustain healing, you have more utility, whether that be engage options. Anna has a sleep dart. Stukov has his slow, which is later a silence root when combined at 13. You know, Uther has a point and click stun, as part of his base kit, and that's a full second, which is actually a reasonable amount of time and better than a ton of normal tank stuns. So, something to keep in mind there. So, what don't they do well? Well, double support, you give up a lot of macro usually. None of these heroes wave clear particularly well. None of them take camps particularly well. None of them really do a lot to your overall macro game. But, so when you build these comps, you're trying to make up for that weakness by having two heroes that essentially add nothing to your overall macro game plan. And normally that's a challenge if you go with the traditional structure. Like, you have a tank, and tanks also typically don't have wave clear with only a few exceptions. Well, in this case, you don't really need tanks with double support anymore. And that's because bruisers are a bit overtuned at the moment, I would say. And so picking double bruiser not only solves a lot of your wave clear and camp take issues and camp clear issues, but also what it does is you don't lose that much on the engage potential either. For example, what's our engage here? Well, it's probably a slow into an honest sleep dart, or a slow into a spear, or at 10 we have leap, things like that. We have a number of options for engages. They're just not super traditional ones. On this side, we have Zulroot, we have Maiev Tether, we have Uther point and click CC, we have Stukov Root at 13, so neither of these have a traditional tank. I mean, you could argue Uther's basically a tank, and not a huge part, but you get the idea. It's like, if this is a different healer, they still have a fair number of engage options, not even counting what the different hero would bring to the table. So the whole point here is, in double support, you traditionally don't want to draft a tank anymore. You can still, it's just a lot harder, because you're not really adding much. Tanks add CC and displacement primarily. Well, if your comp's already pretty good at CC, or, light CC, like a lot of slowing and stuff like that, well then maybe you don't care about having a tank. Maybe you rather focus on more damage or more wave clear. And so in this case, we both have one hero capable of a ton of burst damage as needed. In this case, Maiev, and in this case, Jaina. And then just two good, solid, consistent damage dealers that also macro well. And this is traditionally what you're going to see now. I think like Uther Sonya is a really good 1-2, for example. Because Sonya is so strong with her slam build that it makes up for the damage, and you're not giving up wave clear. And then you can pivot however you want once you have the Uther. And just to kind of showcase what I mean about how engages work in double support, here's just a random example from our game. So you see the Uther going in. It's like, and he goes too far in before his team gets there. You can see the Zul's hanging that way. You see the rest here. But because he's shown and he gets hit and he's slowed, means it's easy to fall up asleep. The team moves in. He gets polyed. The anti-heal grenade hits, and then he's just dead. And despite that, because this the phase comes out slow, what happens? Well, they do a root, and then the Maiev and Phoenix get on him, and then Arjaea's dead. And so that's what I mean. The save heal, this normally would have gone off, and we would have saved them with that. But because it didn't, and they had already used their cleanse for something else, it just didn't happen. But the whole point is, you don't need a tank to set that up. You just need to use tools. You need to draft tools that you can engage with. So whether it's like a slow into a spear, or you're using the spear to set up a sleep, or whatever, or you're just throwing out raw sleep darts, and if you land them, boom, you have an engage, things like that. That's what you want to look for when you draft double support, and when you're playing against double support, that's what you want to look for, because that's how they're going to get in on you and kill you. And so I think that's just a good example of like how this comp works in fights, and why it works despite not having a tank, and why I don't think you're going to see a lot of tanks in future double support comps. Assuming the meta is still bruiser heavy when the CCL rolls around again, I think you'll see a lot of normal double bruiser, double healer comps. And you can kind of see in the background the split fight and how easy it is to like split up and still fight normally even without a tank, as long as you manage the tools you have correctly. And yeah, that's kind of the quick little primer on double support, and also why you want to draft double support in a certain way to make up for tools you'd otherwise be missing compared to a normal comp. But if you do that, I think double support's really, really strong right now. Because you just don't miss much. As long as your healers and your bruisers make up for your lack of normal engage that a tank would give you, I don't think you lose out on anything, which is why I'm making this and trying really to, pin down why it's so good right now. And then all you need is really one burst damage to kind of make up for the lack of a second normal DPS per se, and you're good to go. Like, Nano Malthael's good here. Nano Jane is obviously good. Even if you move them over here, like, if you Nano Uther, for example, he's just a CC machine. And Holy Shock actually does a reasonable amount of damage. So even things like Nano Uther can be surprisingly effective. As for the usual supports, if people are interested, I can make a whole other vid on that. But the general rule is you're going to see Uther, Stukov, Ana, Brightwing the most in these kind of comps. And then other ones you'll usually see in double support are like Ariel, if you have a good auto attacker, or a Gul'dan, or, a good battery for her that's going to consistently feed her. Then she's an amazing sustain healer, and she naturally has a save in Aegis. So that's good. Lili was one used by Oxygen as partially a counter to Tychus, but also because she has one of the best cleanses in the game, and she puts out reasonable damage and healing. And Jugs is actually a pretty good save tool as long as it's not immediate death to a hero. Jugs is actually really good at getting them back up and ready to fight. And that's just kind of the quick overview here of what you'll usually see. As for anti, if you want to run against double support, Ana, obviously very good with anti-heal grenade. Sleep Dart's also good because double support tends to want to clump. Deckard is especially good, not only because of Emerald, which, again, just heal reduction, really easy to hit a bunch of people with it because, again, double support tends to clump. Also, just all the rubies in general, either Sapphire or Ruby is pretty good against them. And then also, if you go double Bruiser, one weakness of this comp is the lack of range. And you can kind of see that on both sides. So something like Sleep or Lornado gets a lot more value than it normally would. And actually, one of the better counters to double support is if you can range them out with, say, a Mephisto or a Chromie, something like that, where you can kind of kite them backwards and continually pump out a lot of damage to them, whereas they can't really easily access your artillery mage or your hammer or whatever, All right, well, I think that's it. The video's already long enough. Have a great day.